Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We're back. We took a brief abbreviation last week for Thanksgiving and Black Friday, and I was just sharing with Kev. We're the typical Italian family, and that means we make way too much food for the number of people. And my niece hosts Thanksgiving because it's the best place for everybody to come together. She's got young kids, so she doesn't mind that they destroy her house and they're running all over the place. But she put out, Kev, this charcuterie board and dips and like the rye bread bowl and 5 different cheeses and olives. It was great, but by the time everybody went through that, they weren't hungry for dinner. And then, and I'll just read up quick. We had a 24-pound turkey, sweet potatoes, mashed potatoes, stuffing, green bean casserole, macaroni and cheese. I mean, it was ridiculous. And, the only thing that got eaten completely was the turkey and everything. Yeah, I hope they love leftovers because they had a shitload of them. But how was your Thanksgiving?
Well, it was great. But, the fact that everybody ate the hors d'oeuvres, is that on, the host, or is that on the people who are consuming?
All the stuff is great, and different and like pepperoni. But I've told her many times, put out stuff, but you're putting out way too much. And by the time we get to dinner, nobody's hungry or everybody is stuffed themselves just because they feel guilty that it's all there. And, I was ready to go to sleep at 8:00 and the Bills game started at 8:30. So, Timothy in the chat, why a 24-pound turkey? Because we had 8 people there and everybody likes turkey. But Russ, how
3 pounds a person seems right.
Yeah.
My Thanksgiving was good. We just had a smallish one, so my turkey was a third of the size of yours, and I still have leftovers. But I'll mention the Max Scherzer signing quickly because I have mixed feelings about it. I wanted Max Scherzer at a certain price. They went above that price. That part I could live with. But now it's the term limit for the age. He's 37. It's 2 years and then an option year, so he could be there until he's 40. Mm-hmm. Some pitchers can pitch till they're 40. Maybe he can. He's going to miss starts. It's not like he's going to start 30 a year. He always misses some starts. He was great last year. I'll tell you where I stand because I don't want to give away my whole article for later. My issue is now you've gotten Max Scherzer. You've got a 2-year window to win. Is your team good enough to win? And right now I'd have to say no. Doesn't mean it won't change, but right now I'd have to say no. And that's the part that I'm at, Kev, the crossroad.
Now, Kev, Detroit had Scherzer, him and Verlander as that 1-2 punch for a number of years. He still is very effective. He was effective with the Dodgers last year. But the only thing I'm skeptical of at this is he's 37. There's a lot of wear and tear on that arm. And, maybe you get a good year. Maybe you get 2 good years, but 3 might be stretching it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair evaluation. The only thing I would say is my observation about him when he was with the Tigers and even beyond that is that he's a bulldog. He kind of has some Jack Morris in him. Mm-hmm. Jack Morris is in the Hall of Fame because he was a bulldog. He just found a way to grind out games and win, and he went a long time. He was clutch in big games, and I think that's Scherzer for the most part. He can grind it out and get it done. So if anybody can do it, he can. And the thing about those situations is do you want the player or not? If you want the player, you got to overpay. That's
no, and that's fine. I didn't mind overpaying in salary. It's years that you look at.
But that's what players look at. They're looking at years. So you gotta just decide. Like
what about the part that I said? You're getting him now. Now you have to be a team to win, and they lost a lot of players.
I'm completely with you on that.
Yeah, that's the only reason I'm at a crossroad. If this were last season, and let's say they had gotten Scherzer instead of Stroman, I'd be like, fine, this team is pretty well set.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like that right now.
Right. Right now, Russ, in terms of in versus out, you've lost Syndergaard, but you really didn't have Syndergaard because he was in there all year.
He only threw 2 innings last year. So.
You've lost Stroman, who I think is a net plus losing him because he's an idiot. And
he did perform well on the field.
He performed well on the field, but if you see what he's been doing on social media,
I know he's
yeah. But now you had Scherzer as a 1-2 punch with DeGrom. I mean, and you got Walker. I mean, they're not. I think they're a net.
Yeah, but then after Walker, it's like Carrasco.
Yeah,
who again is beat up.
I think you're a net plus with your rotation, but you haven't really replaced Conforto.
No.
So yeah, I mean they still
haven't replaced Baez. Whether they get Baez to replace Baez,
they still have work to do. Now, Kevin, I know that the talk is that now Simeon is signed with the Rangers. The talk for Correa might be heading to the Tigers. I mean, I heard that.
Well, yeah, I mean that's who the fan base wants. They certainly don't want Baez. So they were up there was an uproar when that rumor kind of came out. He strikes out, as often as Goodrum does.
Although I'll tell you, even though he does strike out often, he does some things in game that Correa doesn't do. Like he will make the craziest of slides and avoid the catcher. He will make some fielding plays that you didn't think were possible. His base running is unbelievably good, like especially for this era. So there are little things about him that I don't think Correa does, but is Correa a better hitter? Yeah, he's a better.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you have to look at it in the context of what the team, wants and what the fan base wants. And they're replacing a guy that struck out 43% of the time 2 years ago, 39% of the time last year. They're replacing a guy who had good speed, could run, could steal bases, had a little bit of pop. So, he wasn't a totally negative player. He just struck out so often that the level of frustration was high. And I think that's what the fan base wants to see. They don't want to see a guy that's going to strike out 4 out of 10 at bats. That's probably first and foremost on their wish list.
Yeah, and Funky in the chat just said about the Blue Jays. I mean, there's a net minus there. They lost Matz. They're probably going to lose Robbie Ray, and they signed Kevin Gausman. So I don't think that's and they've lost Simeon, who was the AL home run leader.
They've lost a lot.
They've lost a lot. So
42 home runs at second base, or 43 home runs because he broke Davey Johnson's record. You're not going to. It's impossible to replace a second baseman and get 43 home runs. That's impossible. It will never happen.
Now you can go out and get a good defensive second baseman, but you have to make up the offense someplace else. So but you could say though, and I'm starting to get a little worried here, is the Yankees haven't done diddly squat other than the lose players, probably in the Rule 5 draft and probably in their non-tendering of players. So everybody's waiting for Brian Cashman to make his big move, and December 1st is the deadline before everything gets shut down because
I don't think he's making a big move, Mike. I think what he's doing is waiting until after when the scrambling begins for that week or two before training camp. He will then make some offers. I think that's what he's waiting on.
Right. He's looking for bargains, and it's just an anathema to me that the Yankees are looking for bargains. But anyway, all right, let's start the show.
The Mets will outspend the Yankees this year. They will.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Listen, I'm just telling you the truth. You don't like it as a Yankee fan. I'm telling you a fact.
Jesus, Russ. I'm admitting you're right. Would you?
Oh yeah, you really admitted it. That was great. Great admission.
No, don't fight over baseball. It's the off season. Let's talk about real sports.
We're gonna fight over hockey.
Much better.
Hello, hockey world. Oh, wait, there's Zach. So, Zach, go ahead, start the show. I was just about to do the intro.
Okay, hold on.
It's the 29th of November.
Yeah.
Open book test. We gave you the answer.
Just had to get my phone. Sorry, I'm in a weird place, as you can tell.
Yep.
All right. Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, November 29th, 2021.
I'm Michael Agello, and happy Hanukkah.
I'm Ken Ice, and I'm here to talk about the Habs because stuff is happening finally.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology. Yes, happy Hanukkah to everybody out there.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Necklin. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday. I'm trying to figure out on my iPad where I should be looking to.
Look to your left. There you go. You're good right there. That's okay, straight up.
So if I look straight like this, I look at Mike. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
I gotta look at you. All right.
Yeah. It's a fake word.
Stare at Mike the entire time.
Wow.
And watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we do have a lot of different news today.
Oh,
And
could we all celebrate the dismantling of the Montreal Canadiens, Corinne?
Oh yeah, sure, we can celebrate. I don't mind. I think that was overdue, to be honest. So I'm happy.
Why don't you take it from here, Corinne? Lots of changes. I wouldn't say unexpected because this is Montreal and nothing should be unexpected. But this team was in the Stanley Cup Finals a couple of months ago, if I remember. So
yes, it was in the Stanley Cup Final, heck, but that was just a fluke. It was brought on by COVID. Making the bubble playoff kind of made Bergevin think, oh, we're nearly there, I should spend now. And he got to spend when no one else had money. Right. And so they ended up in the playoffs. And, it was just so many circumstances. And they got to play the crap Leafs in the first round. So playing
the right team at the wrong time. Thank you. And taking out their best player with a terrorist attack.
But Molson did mention that Bergevin's firing this season, even though it's on the back of a Stanley Cup run, he did say, we've had a lot of average years, and last year we came really close to being eliminated by the Leafs, so I needed more time before committing again to Bergevin. And then when the season started and nothing's going well, clearly it was time for a change. So, that was coming.
Corinne, let me ask you this because of, excellent reporting that I know that guys like Elliot Friedman and did over the weekend when all this stuff was sort of going down. First, Mellenby resigns, and that was apparently an indicator that Bergevin wanted Mellenby to be the guy, to be the next guy, and that wasn't going to happen. And once that happened, then Bergevin, the indication is Bergevin probably would have finished out the year had Mellenby taken over as president of hockey operations. But once that was ruled out, then it was going to be a clean sweep. Is that what your read is on the situation?
That's pretty much what it is. But I think the clean sweep was a certainty once, the Habs managed to get Jeff Gorton. Once they got him on board, then, they were ready to clean house. And that's what the holdup was. Because Jeff Molson also said today that, when he appointed Marc Bergevin as GM, he didn't have any experience in such a role. And that in hindsight, he would have, if he was to do that again today, he would have put him in as a tandem with a Jeff Gorton type of person. He basically said today that being the Montreal Canadiens head of hockey operation is a two-man's job. It's too big for just one man. And if you think back to the last year, how many times has Marc Bergevin looked on the verge of a mental breakdown? It's been unbelievable.
Well,
he did look tired. I did want to mention this, though. Right. So, because you had mentioned, the clean sweep. But Trevor Timmins was there way before Bergevin and not after, probably, thankfully, for Canadiens fans, because, they haven't drafted well. And their decision to take Logan Mailloux, even if it wasn't Trevor Timmins' decision, he could have said, I'm not doing this or I'm resigning because this falls on me. And he still was a part of that decision-making process, whether he made the final call or not, because we all hear that story. But at the end of the day, he hasn't done well in years. So he had nothing to do with Bergevin as far as I'm concerned. I felt like he should have been gone years ago.
Yeah, I agree with that. But Bergevin, for some reason or another, really liked Timmins, and he wanted.
He's a good guy. He's a likable guy. He's smart, but he just, his record last 5 to 10 years for drafting has not been good.
It's been really bad, especially in the early rounds. So yeah.
Bergevin's a likable guy too. We got to remember that, and really, one of the most. I think when I think back on the Montreal GMs we've seen, one of the more intriguing ones. One of the ones that really just had just a very different kind of GM.
Well, he would come on a radio show and talk to you where.
Yeah.
Well, he would come on a radio show and talk to you where others wouldn't.
Kevin, let me ask you this, because the list of potential names, and we'll talk about this until they end up hiring a general manager. I think it was the Vancouver Province a couple days ago, anticipating that the Habs were going to fire Bergevin, put a list together of 15 francophone speakers that would be potential GMs. And that really like irked me in the sense that if you're the Montreal Canadiens, if you're the Yankees of baseball or Yankees of hockey, you want the best guy, and it should not matter whether he speaks French or not. But then I thought of it this way. If the Buffalo Sabres hired a Swedish or a Russian general manager and he couldn't speak English, that would be a problem for the media and for the fans in Buffalo. So I get that, but I think it limits the Canadiens. I mean, why do they have to have a francophone as the general manager?
Well, I've always thought that they really have limited themselves, especially in this day and age where you can have intense, advanced language learning in a short period of time. Like, I think that the GM job of Montreal is such that a requirement that you enter into a 6 or like in the military, they have these advanced classes where people learn it all in 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah, the Berlitz.
Yeah. Well, it goes beyond Berlitz. They just have this, intense instruction on how to speak it. Like if that job is so tantalizing,
yes,
that if you put as a requirement that you've got to enter into immediately an intensive course and to learn the language, I think people would do that. And that way, you're not limiting yourself to whatever the pool of French-speaking general managers are, because there's a lot of quality people out there that you might be interested in if they were willing to do that. So, it is the thing that fascinated me about all this is that we are used to these decisions being made based on what is happening now,
right?
Yeah.
And this is not being done based on what's happening now. It is in part because of the now. But as Keenan just explained, they had been looking at this for a while. It hadn't been going well. They didn't like the general direction of the team. They understood that last season was a momentum playoff run. They almost lost. They got it going. They were playing great hockey, and they rode it all the way to the final. It wasn't that they had an exceptional team. And, otherwise, you'd look at this and going, well, is it his fault that Shea Weber is injured? Is it his fault that Carey Price wasn't ready? Well, no, it isn't. But it's the context and of the whole is why he's, kind of out. And, this was anticipated at some point anyway. But to do it now, I think they felt, let's get it over with. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's move forward. Let's get it cleared. And there is a trend now. I know Eck was saying one man can do it. I think that is true. One man can do it, but there is a trend now to get a two-headed monster.
Yeah.
Because there's so much. Let's see, what's the word for it? It's not logistics, but it's a lot more complicated than it used to be.
Yeah.
Well, I can bring up one thing, Kev. One thing about Gordon that's not always reported or talked about is that he has a business degree. Like, he's not just a hockey guy that is in a front office, and that will help the Canadiens, because I do think a lot more guys in the front office should have degrees and not just a degree in hockey, because I do think it helps you. If you look at what Gordon did, I know Ranger fans are always going to be up and down with any GM, but he had a lot of good trades. The draft is the draft. That's not on Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon goes up there and announces it. The draft is on the staff and everything else. So I never put any draft decisions on a GM, but he got their cap under control. He got Panarin over there. He signed the right contracts. And in the end, he signed the right contract with Kreider too, even though people were like, oh, that was a ridiculous contract. I think it was under him, wasn't it?
Yes.
But
But
it'd be a good contract, because look what Kreider's doing.
and even
listen. Here's the thing. We have seen one man. While I agree, Kevin, what you're saying and what you bring up there, Russ, obviously Gordon being a business guy is a huge help.
Yeah.
But while I've seen these committees run teams to a degree, there does need to be one vision. There needs to be one guy who is the overall hockey guy who's the visionary. I believe. But
there always is.
Yeah.
Even in a two-man, there's always one guy.
There's always one guy. Corinne, go ahead.
Right.
go ahead.
Well, I just want to come back to the French point that Kevin was making. It's not an interesting requirement. It's infuriating. Okay, Molson spoke about it today, and he said that's needed.
Corinne, this is someone who writes in French and English for us every day.
Yes, but there's a difference between my job and the GM's job.
Right.
Molson today said that the GM has to speak to the fans. Well, no, he doesn't. His job is to win hockey games. I want him to be able to speak to other GMs, make trades, speak to agents, make contracts. Don't talk to fans. We've got media for that. We've got media who can report better. And, they're appointing a French-Canadian coach as well, saying that, he speaks French. Well, newsflash, Ducharme, when he speaks either French or English, doesn't make much sense. He's got trouble getting his message along. Okay? I'm sorry, but the general manager thing really irks me. It really does.
And in a way, Corinne, what Jeff Molson is doing right now is sort of an end around because.
Yes, it is. He's putting Gordon and putting him in charge, but he's got a French figurehead in front.
Exactly.
To appease the media, but it's ridiculous that it's got to be that.
Now, here's the thing. He's going to hire a general manager who basically, I refer to it as an MLB setup where, like in Toronto, they have Mark Shapiro as the team president and Ross Atkins as the GM. And Ross Atkins was an assistant GM in Cleveland. Shapiro is really the GM, but he just has a different title. So Atkins is the one who goes out and does the press conferences. So you're going to have, and Elliot Friedman read off, Danny Briere, Matthew Darsh, Martin Madden Jr., Jocelyn Thibault, all these guys. All these guys do not have the experience level of other teams hiring general managers. So they're going to be sort of on the job training as an underling and being the spokesperson for Jeff Gorton, and then they're using that as an end around to the GM.
Yeah, they are. And the thing I'm comfortable about with bringing Gorton on is that he was good with the Rangers rebuilt. In Montreal, they've never want to pull that card. They've always been afraid of it, whereas Jeff Gorton is the guy who actually sent a letter to fans saying, all right, it's time for a painful rebuild. We're going to do it, and this is what's going to happen.
And by the way,
yeah, but was that Jeff Gordon or was that
was Davidson, and it was the ownership.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was Jeff Gordon.
Maybe it wasn't him, but he was part of it. And today, in his press conference, Jeff Molson actually said that he was open to that idea. Right. That is groundbreaking for Montreal. We've never heard that before.
And so it's not as if, and I thoroughly appreciate the French part of Montreal and the province. I think it's an amazing thing. It's one of the coolest things about the area. But am I wrong, Corinne, in saying that, a majority of people who are Montreal Canadiens fans in the province do also speak English?
Yes, I'm not sure about that. Quebec is, a big majority of Quebec people only speak French, who cares? You just want to see your hockey team win. You don't care if they can appease you using French.
Well, I will tell you a difference, though, Corinne. So at a press conference that I was at, one of the Winter Classic ones, Michel Therrien was up there and didn't say a whole lot in English. And I noticed he was saying a lot more in French. So I went up to one of the French-speaking reporters and I said, do you mind telling me what he just said? And he let me know. And it was about 10 times the information that he was giving the American media. So there is a way of hiding behind that, too, because, again, the large majority of the world is going to read the Canadian stuff in English. And so you can get some stuff through just for your French fans and ignore the American fans.
Yeah, but the thing is, then people everywhere should be hiring journalists who can speak French and English and write in both languages. Then everyone gets the full story. Not preaching for my own.
That's a good plug.
Corinne, it's funny because I mentioned to Russ, I watched the press conference and Jeff Molson is talking in French for, I would say 90 seconds. And then he gives the English version, which was about 15 seconds. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to let Renaud Lavoie or let you interpret what is being said and translate into English because this is a waste of my time. I'm not getting the full picture of what's going on here because he's going on 90 seconds in French and only 15 seconds in English.
Yeah, that is an issue. Yeah.
Here's the bottom line on this. What is it? Like somebody just said, it was just the titles that are different. But, you've hired a English-speaking guy who's in charge, Jeff Gordon, and you're going to bring in a French-Canadian person who's going to work. It sounds like a good compromise. You have the French-speaking person. He won't be making the decisions anyway. It's going to be Gordon, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. You don't bring Gordon in to do business. You bring Gordon in to make the hockey decision. So I think they've come up with a little compromise, and it'll probably work out for him.
Well,
if you do that, you've got to almost do something like a character who's not ready to be a GM, because the guy who's ready to be a GM won't like that position.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether he likes it if he's willing to accept it.
Right. If he's willing to accept, I think willing to accept it, like guys in the area of Danny Briere, that kind of person who has been working as a GM in a minor league situation for a while, but not quite ready for the majors.
Yeah, I don't think he would accept it.
I don't think he would either. But I'm just saying that I think I do think that there's some people in that.
You don't think there's anybody out there who'll do that, John?
No,
there
is. I just don't think Briere would accept it. I think Jeffrion would accept it, and I think Thibault would accept it.
I took 4 semesters of French. I can do it.
Yeah, no, that's not happening.
I think Corinne. I nominate Corinne to be the GM.
I actually think Thibault would be interesting because he's working with Hockey Canada, and that could give them a little more insight into some players that they don't ever see or talk about a lot. And I think that could help them ultimately. So I think Thibault's an interesting one.
I got to tell you a funny story about this, about our good friend Mike DeGello. I didn't read much social media over the Thanksgiving weekend, and so I was sort of catching up. And I was reading his post about celebrating the death of a 90-year-old Subway owner, and gleefully talking about maybe he had one of his own tuna fish sandwiches, which aren't really tuna fish. And I'm shaking my head over that when I looked to my right and there was a little news flash about Jeff Gordon. I said, there's something that'll even be more happier about than the death of a 90-year-old man.
I wasn't celebrating it.
Oh, you celebrated it.
You didn't celebrate it.
I was just saying that he boasted.
No, you reveled in that news that he probably had his own tuna fish sandwich. So
Toronto fans will celebrate anything,
He boasted the fact that he ate a Subway sub 5 days a week, and I'm like, okay, now you know why he died. But anyway.
Oh my goodness.
No, let me just ask one final thing, Corinne. How much longer do you think Ducharme gets the rest of the season?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a good question. Molson was asked whether the GM and Gorton would have free reign, whether they could hire their own guy and blah blah, and he refused to answer it. He didn't commit to saying Ducharme is there to stay. So I get a feeling that the people are going to be brought in can bring in whoever they want. They might, however, take their time. They don't want to win this season. They want to carry on like it is. So why on earth would you replace the coach? It's going perfectly well to finish down. So let him do it, and then take the time to have a proper search this summer and look everywhere to find a proper coach. That would be great, because I'm sorry, but Ducharme last year, he seemed out of his depth. And unlike Bergevin, he got a contract extension on the back of that player.
We all knew Ducharme. Even you were on board with me, Corinne, during the playoffs that he wasn't good. We were chatting because you were writing for me, and we were both like, he's not a good coach.
They weren't winning because of him. They were winning in spite of him. So and then they give him a contract extension on the back of that. It was just mind-blowing.
Yeah, it was pretty fascinating, like in general. I mean, and we talked about, I mean, I've never been a Ducharme fan at all, and I think that team has really, it is the last season. I mean, I'm glad they didn't extend, this summer, extend the GM like a lot of people thought they might. A lot of people thought he didn't want to be extended. Also, Mike, you had that opinion that he didn't want to be there anymore anyway.
Yeah, at least that was the indicators that everybody said he was burned out, that I guess that, I mean, and if the Mellenby indicators are correct, then at a certain point he just says, I want the guys who I'm working with to carry on, but I don't want to carry on. And now you never know, he might pop up someplace else, a much less pressure filled situation, like Anaheim or Chicago will be pressure filled. But and honestly, the thing is, we thought that the first big move was going to be Vancouver, and the Canadians sort of jumped the Canucks here, because the Canucks have been sort of like investigating and doing a few other things in terms of who they're going to hire. Are they going to fire Petty? Are they going to hire Green? And the Canadians sort of cut in line here and said, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to get the guy.
Montreal isn't a patient market, so.
Well, yeah, but I don't know whether Gorton was in the mix or was even talked about in Vancouver. Probably not, because I don't think he'd play.
I mean, he would have been if he would have been. He would have been anywhere that needed a GM. I mean, he's definitely one of those guys who.
Yeah, he wasn't going to last on ESPN.
He wasn't going to last very long. We knew that.
We knew that. We talked about that.
We should talk about two of the other teams that are struggling, because Kevin wrote.
Well, actually, before that, I just want to say I think Bergevin's going to go back to Chicago. That's where I think he's at.
I think that's very possible.
Well,
I hope he does stay in the league.
Russ,
like I say, he's
the one thing that
have in the league.
The one thing that I would hesitate on that is he was part of that organization in 2010.
Yeah, and Jonathan Taves is still captain, Mike. Like there's
I know, but
Mike might be right on that. Just in terms of not that he had any role in it, but just a public perception.
It's possible, but they haven't cared about that much public perception to this point.
They sort of have,
bringing somebody back.
If they did, they would have settled. They didn't even settle their lawsuit yet.
Yeah, but bringing someone back in.
I think they were going to in the press conference. They were like, "We're going to come to an amicable conclusion," and now
Kyle Beach's attorneys want $50 million. It's amicable, and there's not.
Yeah. I think I told you the story, but I talked to an attorney friend of mine, and he said when he watched them make that public statement about how he just cringed because he said you've just essentially given him a blank.
We lost
blank check. Yeah.
What
T-Mac? Where are you going?
While we wait for Kevin to come back, one breaking news, not big news because I don't think anybody expected him to be claimed, but Evander Kane has cleared waivers, and I don't know if his agent let go of him or he let go of his previous agent, but he's being represented by Daniel Milstein now, and Milstein indicated via Twitter yesterday that Evander Kane will report to the San Jose Barracudas of the
If he wants to get paid, he will.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, he will get paid more playing in the American Hockey League because of escrow. So he'll make more than the $7 million that he normally makes playing in the American Hockey League. But and Matt Murray the same with Ottawa. Kev, those two players, big contracts, term left, in the current construct of the league with all these teams up against it, I don't know if anybody trades for, unless San Jose and unless Ottawa retain big salary. I don't know.
Yeah. If they'll delete half of it, then it maybe. But even then, it's a maybe. I mean, it has everything to do with whether you'd be willing to take a chance on the disruption that he could cause. I mean, if you're believing that he could change, maybe you would, because he's a valuable player. He can score goals and he can play rough, and there's some value to that. But
but he's not worth the gamble.
Well, I think that's a fair evaluation, and I think that's how most people see it. But you never say never. I mean, D'Angelo, now that he's faced his rehabilitation, is now an impactful player for the Carolina Hurricanes.
And for my fantasy team as well. Yeah.
I mean, he's been something for sure. I wanted to get into Kevin, you wrote an article about the Flyers, and I think we should talk about the Flyers, who are definitely heading in the wrong way right now, for sure. You think?
Yeah.
I mean, and I thought Kevin, the way you put it was really good, how you basically said, they have to be careful not to become what they were last year, which is really what is kind of happening.
Well, they're at the exact same spot almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they started out last year 6-2-2, and then they went where they lost a bunch of games, and suddenly the season was done. And they started this season pretty well, and now all of a sudden things have gone south, and it could easily end up just like last year.
But the difference this year from last year is last year you could pin it on the bad goaltending and how Carter Hart was playing. Yeah. Carter Hart is not responsible for it.
No, but it's a different thing. But it's a thing. They can't score goals. They're 27th in the league in power play and 26th in offense.
The only thing I could say is I didn't pick them for the playoffs because I said I knew it would be hard to get the players they got to gel. Now, of course, I didn't know how injured they would be. Right. But that isn't really the reason why they're losing. Part of it is what Kevin said. The vets aren't coming through. Part of it is Vigneault's just flying in the face of everybody putting in the fourth line in third period games where you're trying to catch up and they have no prayer of scoring because there's nobody who could score on the fourth line. That's been a problem. The power play not firing Terrian is a problem because he should have been fired already. They're like 5 for 54.
Injuries have killed them.
Yeah, but injuries is not the answer here. It's not. It has hurt them a little defensively, Mike. But you know what?
They haven't killed them.
If they were scoring 3 goals a game, they would probably have 6 more points in the standings.
I mean,
we wouldn't even be talking about.
You guys see them every game, and I don't. But when you lose Kevin Hayes and you lose Ryan Ellis, those are 2 big absences. I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, I mean. They brought the guy that was supposed to change them the most was Ryan Ellis, and he's only played 4 games. Right. So that's a significant injury. Although, we don't in this league, we don't allow you to blame injuries. So it's just not acceptable. You're not.
The one thing I've said, and I do believe in this, Carter Hart's played fine. Jones has been okay, although lately I haven't loved some of his games. Neither of them are stepping up and getting shutouts. Even though the defense in front of him is not terrific, sometimes the goalie has to actually get a shutout or 2 to right the ship, and it's not happening.
Yeah, it's my favorite Harry Sinden quote in my first year of covering the league for USA Today in 1986. I hate it when my coach says, well, you can't blame the goalie. And I always say I can always blame the goalie because I pay him a lot of money to save us when we don't play well. Right. I don't pay him to save us when we are playing well. He said, you don't pay goalies to make easy saves. You make them to make the impossible saves. That's what you pay goalies.
No, and that's very true. And it's those big key saves at key times that are the difference. Now, then Carter Hart's been much better for sure. And I think people are a little bit overzealous to him as well. I think people are saying, well, he's doing so much better. We all want him to do better. He's a good kid. So I think that the Flyers fans who watch the Philadelphia media or watch the Philadelphia reports, the broadcast, those guys really want Carter Hart to succeed, and they should. And because they work for the Flyers, what have you. But the reality is Carter Hart is better, but he's not incredible. Right. And the other thing about that is, I mean, he's good enough though, because the reality is that they weren't scoring last year either. And they go into these dark holes of all getting cold at the same time, which is like the Nashville Predator disease, I call it. Where no one scores for, and you go down the lineup and this guy hasn't scored for 10 games, this guy hasn't scored for 11 games, this guy hasn't scored, and you can just go right straight down the lineup and their key players haven't scored. You gotta
remember with the power play.
Yeah.
Yandel getting demoted to power play 2 is the same thing Vigneault did in New York. Yandel, when the power play was working this year was when Yandel was on it. He had a couple of turnovers and then all of a sudden he can't get back on power play 1. And ever since then, Provorov has struggled not only on the power play, but in his 5-on-5 too, because it's affecting him.
I mean, to be fair, you're right, but Yandel also has gone 18 games without a point.
Right, but if you were on the power play, that wouldn't be the
insane thing for a guy who's an offensive specialist.
No, but if you were on the power play, he wouldn't be 18 games without a point because power play 2 gets about 23 seconds in Vigneault's system.
Yeah, no,
why did you bring in Yandel if you weren't going to keep him on the point?
Right.
It's a wasted signing.
Yeah, it is. And
you may as well kept around Eric Gustafsson.
Right.
The biggest thing I feel is and I still feel it, and I just feel, I'm going to say that there's going to be, I do feel there's a coaching change coming in Philadelphia, surely.
Well,
I don't think this goes much longer.
I think it's going to take a little while.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I don't think it's coming now, based on what I've heard. So,
well, the name that was mentioned that I heard over the last 48 hours was Rick Tocchet, which makes a lot of sense because of his, connections to the Flyers and everything. And he
just got in the Ring of Honor or Hall of Fame or whatever.
Yeah, he was just there. There's good feelings for him right now. I mean, remember this: all these bold moves that were made by Fletcher were not in Fletcher's character. Okay. Fletcher's character is not to make these crazy bold moves. That tells you that Comcast above Fletcher wants something to happen now.
Yeah,
and the fact that it's not happening now, these coaches are not long.
But Eck, I will tell you, there's a failing of Fletcher this year because, if nothing else, when Ellis was hurt for the second time, he should have come out and spoke about it. There should have been at least 1 or 2 times where Fletcher has actually come out and tried to steady the ship. He has stayed hidden, well hidden, most of this season, and so that's not a good sign either.
They were 18th. They were 18th in scoring last year, so they were middle of the pack.
Yeah. I mean, they were better, but they weren't killing it.
I mean, JVR can't score.
That's not a playoff
having trouble. I will tell you another thing. I think Vigneault has made he made a mistake with. So when you brought up Morgan Frost, and I think Frost is playing well, his best play was with Claude Giroux last year. Remember, we were watching it in the bubble.
We thought that was an incredible combination.
But he won't break up their top line who can't score to put him with Claude Giroux, which makes no sense to me.
Somebody on that top line has to get hurt, and then he'll break up all 4 lines, right?
Right. That's right.
I mean, because that's how it works.
That's true.
And it's like it's very confusing.
And
I mean, the injuries offensively, they've been pretty healthy. That's the crazy thing about it. Like offensively, they've been relatively healthy. I mean, they've missed guys for little periods of time, but and obviously Hayes has never been there, right? So we can sit there and say that. But Hayes, is playing.
That's a pretty big loss, Zach. That's your number 2 center.
He's a big loss, but if you look at him last year, he's not a big loss. If you look at what he did from if you take away the first 2 months of last year, Hayes was almost,
he did hit a run. There's no
question. He had like 2 goals in the last 5 months of the season. I mean, he really is not like this. Not like that's the guy who's going to turn things around, right? So,
well, okay. So you mentioned the Flyers. The other team that you wrote about on your blog was the Canucks.
Yeah.
They're in a death spiral right now. Everybody's sort of waiting for the tweet to come out from the Canucks to say they fired Benning or they fired Green. I don't know whether the first move is a trade, because I don't know whether the Aquilinis are going to want Benning to move anybody. I think it's a crisis of confidence right now.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the Canucks is they have what we have sort of identified as the death rattle, in that it looks like the team is waiting for something to happen. And whenever you see a team that's waiting for something to happen, usually, I mean, you got to do it. I mean, you got to pull the plug on Benning and or the coach.
Yeah.
Well, if they lose to Canadians tonight, that might very well happen, because that would be something unheard of. Montreal would win 2 games in a row.
God forbid.
Yeah, and I think you're dead on, Kev. I mean, and now all of a sudden, like what I read about today, Besser and Horvat are showing up in trade rumors, and they're the guys that are out there. 2 guys, that they could move. Both of them, I think, would be really valuable in other situations.
Right.
I think what's going to happen is they're going to wait until the end of the season, and Benning will be gone, and their coach will be gone, and I thought he was going to be gone 2 years ago, so he's gone longer than I thought he would, but I didn't expect them to fall apart this year. And I think they're going to let the Sedins sort of take over and hire people, and I think they're going to be the bulkhead of the front office now. Travis Green just hasn't done a good job, right? So they'll get rid of him, and Benning has not done a good job in a couple of years.
Yeah, but if Benning's job was relegated to just drafting, he'd be an excellent general manager. But whenever he trades and whenever he signs free agents, he gets in trouble. And then it was that case with Antoine Roussel and with Louis Eriksson and all the guys that they dumped on Arizona. And now, Ekman Larson has not looked like the Ekman Larson of old. And, the other players are struggling. And that's why I don't know whether – the Aquilinis are going to put the future of the team in terms of trading a key player like Besser or like Horvat in the hands of Jim Benning, who has sort of proven that he can't make a good trade. And, are they actually going to let the new general manager do what I have been advocating for the last 3 or 4 years, which is actually rebuild and not reset? They kept signing guys. Everything that they did in this offseason was to sort of hold plug and sort of reset in place and get back to where they were a couple years ago when they got to the second round of the playoffs. They've got massive holes, and they also have a player right now in Pettersson who's sort of underachieving after getting a bridge contract. So there are a lot of issues here.
And Ekman Larson's a disaster.
It's right now it's a disaster. And if you
told me he was washed up, we're right.
If you look at the way that they've allocated their money, Kev, they've got 3 defensemen making over $6 million.
Yeah.
And the defense isn't good.
Well, we've sort of established kind of almost a protocol for rebuilding now. And, they can't do what we would consider the classic rebuild because they have too many younger players and older players that have long-term cap. They're going to have to reset on the fly and, identify the 4 or 5 players that are crucial, and then start trying to dump everyone else because they can't, they're committed now. They've got, they're ahead of the game a little bit. To be honest with you, they're going to do the kind of rebuild that the Rangers did.
Yeah.
The Rangers had players that they were going to keep. They weren't going to move them. They moved out other players.
Right.
They didn't take a full step backward. They didn't strip down the chassis like the Buffalo Sabres and the Maple Leafs did. They just took a half step back. They got rid of a lot of guys. And they got lucky in the lottery. That's what you got to hope for. You need some luck,
right?
And do it that way. But they really can't do a complete rebuild.
No, they really can't. They really can't. And over the weekend, I did something that's kind of now even more interesting. I think I have this thing I've done for years, which is I have all these different factors that I throw into a spreadsheet to try to determine who are the most desperate teams in hockey. And I came up with my top 10 desperate teams in hockey. Mm-hmm. Vancouver being number 2. Basically, and it has to do with, the kind of moves you made, the expectations, where you are going right now, how long your coach and GM have been around, that kind of thing. The number 1 and number 3 team was the Dallas Stars. We talked about them a little bit too. They're another team that's in desperate straits. And then the number 1 team on this list, though we haven't talked about yet, it was the New York Islanders, which is another team that is, expectations through the roof and just, running into all sorts of issues right now. And
their fans are already dumping their tickets.
Fans are already.
I would argue a little bit. I guess it depends on your definition. For this year, I would call them, desperate because they were expected to win it all.
Yeah.
But you've still got Lambrell as your general manager, Trotz as your coach. You've got some good players on that team. Barzal's a good player. You have, probably 6 or 7 really good players. You've got 2 great goalies. I wouldn't.
You do, but they
do have older parts now.
The thing is a little bit scary.
It would have looked good on a championship run. It don't look good otherwise.
I think I'd rather be the New York Islanders than probably 10 or 11 teams in this league.
Yeah.
You could always make that argument.
I thought was interesting when I did my research. They have gotten a year older every year for the last 4 years, and their average age.
Right.
Oh, so everybody gets a year old.
No.
That's what I thought as well. I was like, how is that weird?
No, but I'm saying on the average age of the team.
Well, it
does age a year every year.
Well,
that was crazy.
I see your point. I think your point is because they were expected to win it. If they don't win it, they're in trouble because they're an aging team.
And Lou keeps adding older players because
but the guys he's adding won't be there long. Parise will be gone.
Right. Chara and Parise add 80 years, and they, they're $750,000, extra pieces. So it's the statistic might be true, but honestly, I heard somebody analyzing what the problem with the Islanders, and it may have caught up to them with the Pulak injury and the loss of Devin Taves last year, and then the loss of Leddy, the mobility on their.
That's the thing, Mike. You're dead on when you say that, because what is going on when I watch them, and I watch them a lot, is that they managed to deal with Devin Taves' loss. That was he's a good player, but they had to lose him. And I was really shocked. I really would have thought he would have affected them more than Nick Leddy. But I think Nick Leddy's affected them a lot more because Nick Leddy has also screwed up the entire defensive pairings. And that loss of Nick Leddy has made them change their pairings, and their pairings are all out of whack.
Well, I think what's really hurt them is getting the puck out of their zone. I've had so many emails from Islanders fans. I have several of them who've read me for years, and they send me just about how frustrated they are about the Islanders, they know Trotz is frustrated too because that's his game. They just can't get the puck out, and they didn't. It's like they didn't recognize Leddy's value until he was gone.
They really didn't. And what he did for other players too, and what he did, for his defense.
But there is something else, Zach. They're not getting any value this year from Pajot or from Palmieri. They are killing them. Combined, they're 14 points. And they had them extended for years. And this is why this desperation. One of my factors on the desperation thing is that the longer a GM and a coach are in town, the more desperate without winning, the more desperate a team becomes. And that is another thing that I think is playing into this. Trotz is an incredible coach. We all know he's an incredible coach, but we all know that he finds ways to make the playoffs because he
dealt with some incredible things in Nashville and always be able to
Yeah,
get
but the last 2 playoffs, he's done really well.
No, he has.
done
This
really
year's
well.
a math problem. Like this year is not. I'm not going to put this on him. This is not because of coaching but again, he was desperate in Washington and still won.
He still finds ways. No question. You can still win when you're a desperate team, and you can still win it. But that doesn't mean it. Also it does mean that Lou has to. The pressure on Lou to do something. Basically, why I do this desperation chart is to try to figure out the pressure on teams to do something. And the concept on Lou is the pressure on Lou to do something is getting pretty big.
Well, I know that, and I'll just take, I'll quibble on this one because I think number 4 on your list of desperation was the Leafs, who the last month have been the best team in the NHL.
But will they be when it matters?
Well, right, and that's exactly my point, Corinne. It's November, and we've seen them have success in November before. Do I think Kyle Dubas will make moves or try to make moves before the deadline? Yeah, if he can within the construct of the salary cap. But really, this season, the regular season, other than qualifying and being one of the 8 teams, is meaningless. It starts for the Leafs the first week of May in the playoffs, and if they advance in the first round, then that's a successful season. And if they're not, then I think that Kyle Dubas might be in trouble. Although less and less so, because I think there's a lot of other general managers out there.
Here's what I would say about it. I mean, everybody always has kind of a personal list about what you think teams are at, and that's your list, and that's what it is. But I think if you went around the league and said, name teams that you think are desperate, I don't think the Maple Leafs are on there.
Correct.
Yeah, and people are thinking they're playing well. And this time it seems like they're playing better to me offensively. They're very good right now. And their defense seems to me to be a little better.
They're playing playing the best team defense that I've seen.
Right.
They played good last year.
And the reason that they're number 4, Mike, is because of the way they're playing this year. I mean, otherwise they would be like number 1. Or if they were struggling, they would be up the top of the
mean, if they were 21-0 right now,
yes,
it would still be the same as what Mike said, because what Corinne said about, until they get in the playoffs, everybody's going to say, but can you do it then?
I totally agree. And they have. And they're like the Edmonton Oilers that way, right? I mean, Edmonton Oilers are in the same boat. The Edmonton Oilers are doing really well for sure, but it doesn't matter until they get to the playoffs. So to me,
Corinne, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say I gotta run because my other job calls.
Okay.
But it's nice to be agreeing with you for once, Mike. So that was a first. So enjoy that. Thanks for having me.
Corinne, even a broken clock is right twice a day.
That's true. I accept that. That's your very definition. Thanks.
Thanks.
Well, there you go.
Have a good one. All right.
We do need to bring up Brendan Lemieux.
Okay, that's one thing.
The biting incident with Brady Tkachuk has now brought up other things about Brendan Lemieux. Like I've always said, he's a meathead, but I didn't know about anything else. And there was a writer online that took a lot of heat on Sunday because he said he witnessed some things when Lemieux was with the Manitoba Moose. So I don't know if the league is going to look into that or not, but that's something now that could sort of follow Brendan Lemieux even after this, whatever suspension he's going to get. And he's offered he was offered to be there in person, so it's going to be at least 5 games. The interesting thing is then Matthew Tkachuk came out and did that whole tirade, and he wasn't wrong about what he said about Brendan Lemieux. And then the question that I always come up with is, why do we still have these guys in the league?
Yeah.
Because I think teams still want a player that stirs things up. Yeah. Now if they're marginal talents, then that's
he's a marginal talent.
Right, and that's the reason why his career may be short. And he was a top pick in the 2nd round by the Sabres. He never played a game for the Sabres. They traded him to Winnipeg to New York, now New York to Los Angeles. I think you could make a case for him staying in the league if he was more of a contributor. But the reason he's been on now 4 teams is because he is what he is. So I don't know how much longer it's going to be before he ends up in the American Hockey League or even out of hockey, Russ.
No, but my question is, and maybe Kevin could answer this, with the climate that we're in now, Kev, should the NHL look into the situation, make a few calls about the Moose before they talk to Brendan Lemieux about this situation?
I don't know. I mean, I would think the Players Association would have an issue with that looking at his history. I don't know that. I mean, that's interesting. I think that's a great question to ask. I don't know the
because these were like physical things These were physical things that went on with the Moose that this guy is alleging. So to me, it's sort of like, well, this was something physical too. When you bite somebody in a COVID era, something's wrong with you.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. What was funny or borderline a couple years ago, like Brad Marchand licking Leo Komarov, now is potentially dangerous and potentially fatal with COVID. So
biting in the in the old days in the fighting world was sort of like she spit on my hand when you go through the soccer lines. Everybody heard about, he bit me, and you're just
Conrad Dobler was biting guys, and
but obviously it does happen, and
now I have to bring this up because I bring it up on every show. But as we get closer and closer, the chatter has been increasing, and Emily Kaplan over the weekend was reporting a number of things regarding the Olympics, and obviously, the All-Star. Here's one thing I don't understand to start. Why the NHL is having an All-Star game in an Olympic year where they never have before. And the only reason is probably because of money, because of, I guess ESPN wanted an All-Star game, which I don't get because it's a bad ratings thing. It always,
you don't know that it's a bad rating.
It's a huge thing in the cities where they're in. I always have to sort of explain this, but when you go to them, they're very big events in the city, and they're usually kid oriented. The tickets end up corporate tickets, and they go to kids and corporate.
They may be having outdoor events for this, Kev. I was told that they may be doing some of the skill stuff on the strip, which could get big crowds.
Yeah, it's really, as I always say, you got to look at it as the annual convention. I mean, you have a right to say, look, in a COVID environment, should we be doing this? I mean, that's fair, but they do them mostly because they're huge events in the cities, and to cancel them just when you've promised them is always a little bit difficult. But the one thing I want to bring up again to people that I got to keep reminding people who send me emails and say, why doesn't Bettman just cancel this Olympics? We hate China. Bettman does not want to go to the Olympics. Well, he has never wanted to go to the Olympics. If it was up to him totally, he would pull the plug a long time ago. That's not it. He has made a promise to the players.
It's
up to the players. If the players decide this is too much, we're not going to go. Gary Bettman will be so happy.
And to that point, Kev, because you've been dead on in that the players want to go, the owners, the teams don't want to go. You're seeing increasing. The Islanders have games canceled. Now Carolina's got an outbreak with a couple players. But Emily Kaplan over the weekend said, NHL players uniformly have fought to play in the Olympics. It's important to them. But anecdotally, I'm hearing more trepidation about going. One player I talked to said, if you test positive in China, you're stuck there for 3 weeks. That's brutal. Guys are terrified of that. And that's the thing. It's not injury, because injury is.
We talked about that. Like, it would be tough to be.
I'll tell you the other thing they're in, because I talked to someone who's going to be involved in that too, and he said the thing that bothers him is you have to mask everywhere.
Yes.
Like if you're in there, like there's no free zone, because everyone in theory is inoculated, but you still got to mask up everywhere.
There's another variant now, There's another variant
within the dressing room, within the on the lower levels, in the village, athletes' village, you have to be fully. Everyone just is irritated by that.
The only place you're not going to be able to be masked is on the ice.
That's correct.
I tell you where the pressure is coming from, though. So, even on Sunday Night Football, Tirico had a whole diatribe about how the Olympics is only 9 weeks away and it's coming. And so, NBC is putting a lot of pressure on this, too, because they're not canceling the Olympics.
No.
And if the NHL says they're not going, they're probably going to say it on Sunday Night Football and make a big deal out of it.
I don't think this late in the game that, the U.S. or Canada will boycott the Olympics in China. It's too much of a political football. But the NHL might say, we're not going to send our players or make our players available if all of a sudden, like I said, now we've
Is there a backup plan, Kevin, if that happens?
Well, I wondered that too. We've already got the 2 weeks scheduled. This will end up being maybe the first 2-week vacation ever that it's a non-lockout.
You don't think they'll schedule games?
I don't know. I can't. Maybe they
How
have
about
to
a
get.
backup plan for the Olympic team? I mean, like,
Well, okay.
what happens?
Oh yeah.
Like,
Yeah. There is for sure.
Well,
there is a backup plan for the Olympic team.
Kaplan further, she said, if NHL players pull out of the Olympics, I could see the NHL shortening the break from 3 weeks to 1 week and rescheduling some games.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yes.
Well, they are going to try to reschedule the Ottawa Senators and the Islanders. Yeah. But that's a little unfair. So you got to give everybody some break.
Right.
But I don't believe. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I can't believe Bettman pulling the plug without the players' blessing.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think he wants to go to war with players.
No,
he doesn't.
So if they want to go, and the guys that I've been watching, and to be honest with you, I've only talked to one person involved, and but I am watching the quotes from the top players. And 3 or 4 days ago, Sidney Crosby said, we're watching it, but right now I sense we still want to go, or something to that effect.
Right.
So,
but and I get that, and a player like Austin Matthews, who this would be his first Olympics, I'm sure he wants to go. But I also do think that, if we start to see, and Eck referenced it, the Omicron variant, if that starts to go through locker rooms and you have mass infections, and schedule and games are canceled, and they've already been canceled, then that's going to be a factor. And so I don't know. I mean,
here's a supposed, like, when we saw Tavares get hurt in the Olympics, we heard the outcry, right? The Islanders were screwed that year, and it was a big deal. So now let's just say Matthews and Marner got the variant in China, and they were stuck there for 3 weeks.
Right.
What would the press be like for that?
Oh.
Yeah, but I'm not sure the players care about the press. I think they're more.
No, but I mean, the team don't care if their season gets washed away. And all.
I mean, they do care about that, and they do care about being stuck there 3 weeks. Like, I see that as the thing that really
that's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing if you're positive and all of a sudden you're sent on a charter flight back to Toronto if you're Matthews. It's another thing to be sitting in Beijing for 3 weeks, completely cut off.
Not being able to practice, not being able to do anything.
Exactly. So
for sure.
Yeah, but anyway, so I think that's something we will continue to track. That
we're gonna stay on it. It'll be fun. We won't
know until the last minute. That's what's gonna happen.
Right.
All right, that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thanks everybody for watching. We will be back again tomorrow. Remember, folks, without the buzz, it is just hockey. Enjoy the games tonight.